Welcome to Getting to Know Yahowah's Beryth family, where we get to learn about the members of Yahowah's covenant family. I hope you will join us on our journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Getting to Know Yahowah's Beryth family. Today we have Mark Mulraine, all the way from the UK. You may know him from his recent book club that was posted on the family page here recently on the Coming Home series. He is doing the show also with Mark, Bridget, and Joshua Wasty, which several of them you have seen in their family, or I think Mark Wasty did a show called The Next Witness, and then Joshua did my show, Getting to Know the Yahowah's Beryth family. So I'm really excited for this show. We have been trying to plan this for quite some time. So welcome, Mark.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's really nice to be here and to meet with you at long last. We've been exchanging for such a long time. And I just wanted to just not correct, but because you were right, but Jordan is also on the show as well for future. And Jordan is Mark and Bridget's daughter, and obviously Joshua's sister. And I noticed she was on the A to Z show, which I watched this morning, which was great, actually.
I saw a couple seconds. Like, I'm so far behind. I keep trying to watch every show, but I'll see a new one and I'll turn it on real quick. And I knew she was Mark and Bridget's daughter and Joshua's sister. We had talked about it. I had talked about it some with Joshua and seen some of her stuff on like Instagram and things like that. So, but I hadn't seen her on a show yet. So was she on your first one?
No, and that's the thing. Okay. She was introduced on the second and third, the one we did yesterday. And and just going back to the A to Z show, as I say, it's definitely worth listening. I find those guys really inspiring to listen to, and because it kind of matches of many of our experiences anyway, you know.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's just crazy. It kind of brings me to kind of what we were talking about, earlier prior to the show. There's just everybody's so different, but yet everybody's so nice. You know what I mean? Like it's a great family, and we all have a lot of similarities in our story and stuff, but we're also so different. Like there's so many similarities and so many, unique things about each person. It's amazing.
Exactly. And
Yahowah chose well, right?
Oh, he did. I have no problems. Everyone that I've ever seen on the shows, everything that Yahowah's done, with the exception of the obvious people that will become nameless. But even then, I listened all the way back then. But yeah, just on that, I suppose.
I'll quit rambling then.
Yeah,
I'll quit rambling, and we'll give you the floor, and you tell us your journey to Yahowah.
Okay, so I guess I got to start at the beginning of when I was younger. So I was born in 1967, which makes me 59 years old. As the time that I'm recording this, where you're recording this, and I was born in a place called Hackney, which is actually in London. Now, Hackney borders a place called Haringey, and the reason why this is important is because it was quite a very it was back in those days, I suppose people on a similar level in terms of what was so-called poor end of the scale. So there were other sort of upmarket places in London, but Hackney and Haringey, which is where I was brought up, in a place called Stamford Hill, which sort of sat in between. The reason why I mention that is because it was a very strong Jewish community, and especially Hasidic community. And but the school that I kind of went with, that was they didn't have any Hasidic Jewish people there, but of course there was loads of people from Israel, etc. And I guess the reason why I say that is that growing up there was very I suppose when you're young, you don't know anything different, so you're surrounded with people that I found very, very unusual. It was just so bizarre because they kept themselves to themselves in terms of the Hasidic, but we kind of lived in harmony as such. In fact, it was actually a blessing to, when my mum used to send me out to shop on a Sunday because everything else was shut. Those Jewish shops were open, so I got to see as a part of life which I wouldn't have kind of known before. My parents, they're from a place called St. Vincent, which is in the West Indies. It's between Barbados and St. Lucia. I've never been, but they brought me up to be pretty kind of quite an even kind of guy in terms of I didn't really get into trouble or anything like that. I was called what's called an in-between, I suppose, in certainly in English, sort of not vernacular, but just it's kind of a thing. There was where people are just neither. I wasn't particularly introverted, and I certainly wasn't sort of out there, sort of trying to get into trouble or anything like that about anything. My mum was that she'd come from a sort of Catholic school background, of which she always used to comment and tell us about how bad the treatment was. The Catholic nuns used to kind of be really sort of harsh over in the West Indies, and so it wasn't something that she enjoyed. Funnily enough, though, she wasn't particularly religious, is where I'm getting at. She never insisted that we read the Bible. In fact, I don't even recall her ever talking about the Bible or anything. My dad, very similarly, he said he just wanted a quiet life, and in fact, he didn't really engage with us. I've got an older brother and an older sister. My brother's 10 years older, so kind of like you can imagine, 10 years difference, and your big brother doesn't really want to mix with you. So we was kind of not estranged, but we weren't particularly close at all. My sister a little bit closer. We were 5 years difference. I remember going to what's it called, Sunday school at those times, though, and as I say, my parents weren't particularly religious or anything, and now I think back, it's probably because they wanted to get rid of us kids for Sunday and told us to go to church, and like they do whatever they're going to do, and I don't know, I can't possibly imagine, but it only occurred to me thinking about it the other day. But and back then it was called, I don't even know if they've got the same sort of denominations in the US, but it was just a Methodist church, and it was very, very very solemn, sort of. No, it wasn't like the churches were happy clappy type stuff or whatever. It was predominantly because we're obviously I'm a black guy, in terms of the racial spread in that time, it was predominantly, I guess, more Caucasian that were going to the church, and it was just a very quiet sort of thing, and honestly I only just used to enjoy it just to get whatever sweets afterwards, and sort of play, meet up with my cousins who was going there at the time. So I guess so nothing great to kind of talk about with regards to my wish to know who God was at that time. I just sort of, like everybody, like a lot of people, you celebrate Christmas and Easter's and all these sort of things just for the sake of it. I went to a school though, so we're going further on. When I went to secondary school, which was about from 11 years old. Again, because of the nature of where we were and back in those times, it was very. You didn't really have any high aspirations. Let's just put it that way. The era didn't sort of promote the same sort of affluence that I could ever see from where I was being brought up. My parents both did sort of, my dad was a carpenter who worked for the local government sort of thing, and my mum was a seamstress, and it was a very sort of ordinary childhood. My own I guess, even though I said I wasn't introverted before, what I do know, which I recollect from back then, is that I liked my own company a lot. So when it was the school holiday times, I was quite happy to do my own thing. And I was actually a little bit of a bookworm as well. So when others were out sort of gathering in groups, etc., and I would always have maximum two friends that I'm hanging out with, and I'm not doing anything with big groups. I think I sort of got into sort of Yahowah's what we're now learning, that the groups are not good things. The school system that I went through was pretty rough in terms of um, and the expectation of people coming out of school was not very high. So when I did come out of school, and with average grades, I ended up going to a technical college to do a diploma in electronics and telecommunication. Did that, and then I went on to uh, did an apprenticeship, which was the best thing I could have done at Imperial College and in London. Now, Imperial College is quite a famous college for the sciences. It happened to be in a place called South Kensington, and South Kensington is kind of the posh part of London. It's kind of Knightsbridge area where you can think of like a place like Harrods, where everybody knows, and it was just affluent. So the age that I ended up going there, I got to see quite a broad, well, it was two different sides of life and what it could be. One where it's kind of not, I wouldn't say, it's certainly not ghetto or anything. I didn't live in the estates, which you guys call the projects or anything. We had a normal house, very much like the house I currently live in now. Unfortunately, not the one in the backdrop of here. much more modest arrangement.
I think we saw in the beginning, before I zoomed the cameras in, that giant piano you got back there.
Oh, well, yeah. And I've got to get my cleaner to come and clean it later.
Yeah. I got to do some cleaning later today because my house is getting filthy and I don't have a cleaner.
Yeah, I wish. I'm the cleaner and my wife, actually, and the cats are making a big mess all the time. But yeah, so as I say, I started to see a different side of life. I got to mix with people who were from the other side of the track, so to speak. I kind of liked it. I enjoyed the fact that I was able to earn money. I had the best of both worlds because although I didn't have a degree and I wanted to go to university, I was working in a university, Imperial College, and I was able to get paid and learn and study and get my qualification. And there I kind of realized as well, because some of the things I had to do with electronics was to make and design circuit boards and for different projects for telescopes, actually, that they would use in Spain to do some of these great optical, big observatories and stuff like that. And I had to set up equipment for the really brainy people, i.e. the ones that went to the college for bypassing their exams and getting their good grades. And I got to realize that they weren't as smart as I thought they were, because they would come to me with really bizarre things, and I thought, wow, okay. And you kind of I sort of thought at the time, wow, if I had a better start, I could have been doing, I could have been ahead. But I wasn't too unhappy with it at all, actually, because as I said, I was living the life, was able to do the sort of party sort of style, would be able to go into the student clubs and get the same discounts and have a drink and whatever. And with my couple of friends that I would go. After that, I changed job. I worked in the West End of London, a place called Carnaby Street, working in IT. Back then, I was doing all sorts of things which not relevant to what we're doing now. But the confidence sort of waned a little bit, because I started to come across people who were a little bit. I just remember having been a group situation after work, and one guy is particularly sarcastic and he basically showed me up and sort of said, "What's that, Mark? What couldn't quite hear that." And that's because I didn't speak to many people, and he kind of showed me up as if this guy, he doesn't want to mix, I forever remember that day, because I started to try to figure out who I am, or what what sort of personality I was. And as I said, I am quite an introvert. I like my own company, in terms of I'm quite happy to go off and do whatever, and read a book or whatever. And I suppose maybe I should rewind a little bit. I suppose obviously we're talking about God and what my beliefs were, because at this point I didn't really have any heavy belief system whatsoever. There was no reason to. Until I guess the time it changed for me is that my sister, well, I was living at home at the time. My sister was at university, and I remember her coming home, and she became a born again Christian, and so I started to receive that sort of the treatment that you kind of expect when someone has knows who Jesus is, etc., and decides that I should know who Jesus is, and basically inundates me with information where and sort of kind of I sort of not cajoled me to go to a church or not a church, but to see a pastor who would then sit with me and my cousins at the time and talk to us about the so-called Gospels. And so at that point I sort of had a better idea of what Christianity was, but I wasn't really particularly bought into it. As I said, I was just like everybody. I was living my life, and I couldn't see how it helped me, what I was knowing. So winding forward, life has carried on a little bit like that. Eventually, I meet my wife.
How old were you then at that time when your sister became like born again, and then started sharing stuff with you?
I guess I must have been about 18, 19 or so, I suppose.
And this is after you've already done like your technical school and you're already working and everything?
No, well, I'm working, but yes, yes, exactly right. And I did do a sort of an extension of some more studying. But yes, I think it was at that time that she implanted that first seed into me. And but like I say, it didn't really get roots from that seed. But winding forward years later, I got married. My wife is from Yorkshire. She's white, so I was in an interracial relationship, which was kind of hard back then anyway, with lots of different things going on. But it's a lot easier now. But we were kind of happy to a point. I was a toy boy. I was 6 years. I was 6 years old, younger than her, and it turns out that she had to have a hysterectomy that we found out, so we couldn't have children. So we decided to adopt, and we were very fortunate. We adopted our little boy. Then he's now 29, but. We were a really happy family. We were just so overjoyed. I can remember we were beaming like from the ear to ear when we first met him.
How old was he when you guys adopted him?
Well, he was quite old for he was 17 months old. He was 17
but you got him young then.
Yeah, I was young.
You didn't adopt like a teenager.
Yeah.
Or
No. But the thing is, this is where it's still all connected, because his birth mother was actually having another baby, and of course they offered her to us, and of which we were really happy. And she was a girl. It was like, wow, great! It was family complete, And there was a lot of issues going on in the background about birth father and mother and stuff, but it didn't matter. We were in our realm. We were fantastic. I should have pointed out that we moved out of London at that stage. Actually, we moved out of Tottenham, which is the Haringey area that we're talking about, purely because although we were wanting children, what sort of tipped it over for us. I was going up to the shop on a Sunday morning to get a paper, and there was a helicopter had landed in the middle of the road at the bus stop because somebody had been stabbed or shot or something. And I got back home and said, right, that's it, that we're getting out of this place, because it was a bit of a hellhole, in terms of, as I say, just low aspirations, and it was just crime and stuff. So we ended up in a place.
Nobody really had real motivations to leave, or at least not the majority, and they just kind of sat there and with nothing to strive for and just preyed on each other, I guess. But so you ended up with two beautiful children, a boy and a girl, actual blood brother and sister.
They were, blood brother and sister, and and so we moved out. First of all, we moved out to a place called Milton Keynes, which is a new town, like probably about 60 years old now. And we just wanted to build a life there. Unfortunately, we found the place a bit soulless, and so we moved to where I live now, which is Bedford, which is not too far away from Milton Keynes. And we bought a new build house. Back then, we could actually afford it and stuff, even though the interest rates and everything was high. But then, of course, there was lots of mortgage money going about. So anyway, so roll on. I know about 13 years. I need to be precise, but actually, what was the trigger for me was in 2011. Basically, my wife had a diagnosis of being ill, and I say it like that because when we went to the consultant, he did not particularly specify what the reason was. I just remember that when I did actually have a chance, because my wife was talking to him, and then she had to go to the toilet, and in the meantime, the guy was there, the consultant was there, and he leaned over the desk at me, and said, he said, you have to be really strong, right? And before you know it, my wife came back in. And what I didn't realize is what he was talking about, because 5 weeks later she passed away, and she passed away on my birthday. And the reason why that's so significant for me is that obviously, it's going to leave a stain. But there was prior to that, she wasn't particularly, showing any signs of what happened. But it turns out she had pancreatic cancer, which is probably the most aggressive cancer you can have. So that threw me, because
sorry you went through that.
Thank you.
That being very, very difficult.
Yeah, it was difficult, and I mentioned before the show that it was my birthday this week, and so turning 59, and going to, because I go to the grave because my daughter would like to go and visit the daughter. She's always up in my head anyway, and I don't really tend to do the graveyard thing too much, but for lots of reasons, as we kind of know about our souls, etc. But the point is, what happened before that is that on that build-up of that, I recall having to call my auntie. I think it was her anniversary or something. I phoned her just to wish her whatever, and I obviously told her what was happening to my wife. And my wife was ill in bed at this time, and just couldn't really. She was housebound. She couldn't really move, and I recall my auntie, who is religious, saying, "Oh, Mark, are you praying? You doing this?" And I thought, well, no. And she sort of almost like tutted at me as if to say, well, you need to be praying and get down on your knees. You need to kind of. And I thought, yeah, maybe I do need to, because this is the first time I'm looking this type of death in the face of someone I love. So I by this time my parents had passed away for health reasons and age. My mum was on dialysis, so her kidneys were not good, and my dad had dementia, and so he didn't really know me for many years of his life. He lived on another 8 years after being diagnosed, and so I had to just go visit him in the home that he was in. But anyway, so going back to this religious thing, as in, I then started to investigate, because it. And I can't remember if she kind of said it to me or whatever, but the point is that Christians kind of believe, at least this is one of the denominations, that if you're not a believer, then you're going to go to hell, and all this kind of stuff. And that was really hard for me to kind of bear and take, because my wife was she was an amazing woman. She wasn't religious, she wasn't political, she wasn't conspiratorialist. She's very popular. She was just a really naturally likable woman to anybody who knew her, and that was borne out by her turnout at the funeral. But I suppose because on that day, I should preempt it and go back a little bit. It's my birthday. My wife, the day before, had to be taken into hospital, but it turns out there was some sort of healing convention or something in Bedford. And so I thought, okay, before I go along and visit my wife, her parents were with her at the time, just in the hospital. I'm going to go to this place, and to tell them and get them to pray for me, and they did. Excuse me.
No problem.
They we're all standing there. I'm in tears about how my wife was. And at this time, honestly, didn't even know that pancreatic cancer was the thing. But the guy sort of must have touched my shoulder and said, "Your wife is, go back to your wife. Your wife is will be fine," or something like that. I can't remember what the words. And of course, like 10 minutes later, I do go to the hospital, and she literally died like 3 minutes later. And the only thing I can be thankful for is that I got to see her. But the fact that didn't even realize that I was never told that she was at that brink, because the day before she was at home, and in fact she was due to go to the oncology unit that day, but she actually collapsed getting into the car, and so that's why I had to get the ambulance, and that's why she ended up in hospital. But prior to that, there wasn't any. I just assumed that there would be some sort of radiation treatment or cancer. So maybe, I don't know if that's when you said earlier, maybe that's what you thought I said, but I don't think we even mentioned it then.
Okay.
So yeah, that's obviously threw me back. So all of a sudden I've got 2 young children, 2 adopted children who have got issues of their own. Their identity with the mother that they know didn't know their birth mother, etc. But I'm just there thinking, well, how am I going to cope? And I'm working as well. I'm traveling, doing a commute every day into work. And so after the funeral, obviously I did have time off, etc. But where this is going is that it didn't, for some reason, I probably sort of thought I didn't pray hard enough or anything. And this is what religion does to you. It's almost like I didn't do enough, and what have you. And I was a very different sort of person back then. And I should also, it's just so much, but the fact is I was one of those people that was, no, actually I won't go there until the next, but I basically took some time out from work. But from a bittersweet point of view, I'd had enough money to pay off the mortgage because of my wife's death. It was in death insurance, so I was able to be at home and support myself without going to work, and basically ensuring that I could sort out the children. I bearing in mind I'm living in a place where I do not know anybody. The only reason why I knew people in the community is through my wife, because she, doing the school run and that kind of stuff. So she, that's how I was able to meet people. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, wow, what am I going to do? And so the children, I became quite withdrawn into my own bedroom a lot of the time, and because my children was as well. They were obviously trying to recover from what was going on, and by doing that, I started to look down this path of Christianity, but also what was going on with me. I was looking at conspiracies as well. So it was really weird. I not weird, but I know I've got the timing kind of slightly wrong. But suffice to say that it was I just basically got sort of tunnel visioned about life, and I sort of shut off, and just was being fed all this nonsense from sort of things like the Alex Jones type shows and things like that, and it was almost like a distraction from life, but also just trying to. I was looking at these videos. I was trying to read the Bible. Honestly, reading the Bible or the New Testament was just complete. I just found it so weird and bizarre, and in terms of there was just too many different things in between that just didn't add up to me. But I thought I'd persist, and I started watching YouTube, trying to find, which I later then came to realize they were more messianic type things, where they were talking about the Hebrew side of things, but they were still using Jesus kind of as being the main fulcrum of their whole talk.
Just when you were doing all this, because I had a time where I was really would get lost in little rabbit holes and stuff on YouTube, and I used to watch all the Ben Shapiro's and Jordan Petersons and Charlie Kirk. I mean, I would watch all kinds of stuff, and was potentially maybe not as bad as the far right complete MAGA, but I was definitely
going that way,
right leaning MAGA-esque. And it's really funny to see, and I would try to say I'd listen to CNN and Fox and did it, but I was definitely brainwashed to the right side. And it's kind of crazy to see now how brainwashed I was with that stuff, because you watch it and if you're not out trying to fact check it, you're just basically believing whatever it is, and it's just nuts to see. But my question was, when you were doing all this stuff, the YouTube and everything you're looking into, it wasn't just watching it. There was a purpose. You were digging, I'm assuming, trying to find answers to everything.
Yeah, I was digging. I wanted to know where my wife was, because of, as I said, I just thought that it was such a crazy situation that it was impossible for her to be in sheer hell. She just didn't deserve that. And it was kind of like, well, no. So it was, I used to have lots of conversations. My daughter is very good at listening and asking questions. As we used to just talk about just life and stuff. That was one of my biggest things, is like, well, where is she, etc. And who is God? And, was this Jesus guy really the one? And so I used to listen to, as I say, these different sort of programs. There were some that were a bit more, they seemed more authentic, but obviously I now know that that's not the case. But the thing that actually triggered me is that, because I had these doubts in my mind, I used to watch this program with these two guys. They always used to talk, and I don't remember what the show is or who they were, but this guy all of a sudden says, you know what, I'm beginning to wonder about Paul. I don't really trust what he says, because in one scene he's in Damascus and he's gone blind, and another one he's done this. And these guys, they were just all on it. These guys, they seem to be really, really knew their stuff, and hence the reason why I was listening to them. I just used to enjoy listening what they had to say, and it took me aback a bit, because even on the show, because it clearly wasn't recorded, that his co-host sort of even was a bit aghast about it, and he sort of was thinking, whoa, what's going on here? And he carried on to put forward his points, and it was clear that his co-host was not happy with that. But I thought, yeah, you know what, I kind of agree. And then I started doing digging, and I don't know the very, very first time that I saw what I saw, but when I did a search, basically the Google algorithms or whatever must have known, or I think Yahowah must have pointed me, but it said God's name is Yahowah. Okay, and I thought, what the heck is this? This is new. Because at the time, I don't even remember people using. I know some people call Yahweh and stuff like that, and I'm thinking, I don't even remember where that came from. I always remembered, in a lot of reggae songs in Jamaica, the Rastafarians used to call God Jah, and so I kind of thought, okay, is it about Jah or Yah? I didn't know, but that was the sort of start of my sort of journey, and kind of saw this name, tried to look it up. Of course, I am like a dog with a bone when I get sort of the new information, and of course, because it's Google and whatever, and the algorithms, you don't really know where it's coming from. But I must have come across one of Craig's shows back in the day, and started listening to him. And I clearly, obviously, it emanated, and I'll never know how. Well, I may not know, not know at this moment anyway, how that website, because it was literally just one page. I don't even recall it having any words and other than God's name is Yahowah, or Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. But in any case, I started listening to those shows. It obviously wasn't back live. And I was trying desperately to think of what year we're talking about. But what I do know is that when I did realize about the Moedim and trying to understand the Mikra, when I started, I wasn't circumcised. And the time that I got circumcised, or when I'd actually been going through what I believed was Pesach Matzah and Bekorim, when before I was circumcised, and of course, then I started to be desperate. And I think this is just before this. No, this is just after. No, it was in the times of COVID, and of course, I could not get circumcised during COVID. So I was kind of desperately thinking, oh my gosh, what if I get run over by a bus or whatever? I've gone through the doorway of life. That means I'm going to Sheol and all this. And this is because there was so much information on JB's site, which I'll be eternally grateful, like a lot of people, where I would download everything. I was just like a lot of people I've heard say, they were just eating up everything that came out of Craig Wynn, out of the Yahowah shows. And I'm very patient. I can listen to things and read them again and again and again. So I gobbled it all up, and as I said, it because I was doing a lot of shows at the time, and it's hard for me to know the timeline exactly, apart from thinking
interesting.
It's been about.
I'm actually was reading about that recently, because I haven't read a lot of the books. I'm actually rereading, I guess, volume 1 of An Intro to God for our book club, and then I'm in like the middle of volume 2, but it talks about I think it's Shemoth 24 or 25, talks about like I know it has 12 and 24, but I think it might be 12. I don't know. Anyway, I'm messing up, but I know it's in Shemoth, and I was reading the Torah about how it was talking about circumcision and stuff like that, and how, like, if a ger, somebody's with you, but if they're not circumcised, not to partake, and if they once they're circumcised, they can partake, and then they become like the family, so but yeah, no, that just made me think of that when you were talking about your situation.
And I think as well, a lot of it possibly was that when I did do Pesach Matzah Bekorim before I was circumcised, I don't think, maybe it just wasn't, a lot of things hadn't, it was obviously about the timing, because it probably was, I read what I needed to do, and of course I didn't really know if I was doing it properly anyway at that time. But because I'd listened to so many shows, and I had read the books, etc., but maybe it just didn't align with my timing, and but yeah, as I say, eventually.
But the circumcision, you mean? I mean, you obviously were learning as you went, and then did you, when you started your celebrating the celebrating the Moedim and Mikra, did you know you needed to be circumcised at that point, or that was something you started learning as you were doing them?
I think the latter, and that's the point. And I don't know why that was, because it's so obvious now when I look back. I mean, it would have been probably a year or two. I mean, there's a bit of a build-up, because I can't say that I understood the covenant until probably a couple of years into even starting reading. I kind of knew, but to understand how it is now, I mean, the way that Craig or Yoda explains things now in the flesh is so good. It's just so if I had that information back then, it may have been a lot clearer. But the shows and stuff that I used to listen to him to, he was quite detailed on so many things, but the topics would spread out. And even when I listened to him on his interviews and things like that, I mean, it was just
I
the fact
think
that sorry.
I think like in the beginning, maybe you were. I mean, I don't know because I'm so new, but I think like to some extent, I mean, was it offensive to Yahowah when you did it in the beginning? You know what I mean? Just not knowing about that, or but I feel like it, and is should you have not celebrated the Moedim when you weren't circumcised according to like the Torah, or you know what I mean? But there also
Yeah,
might have
well,
been a factor there where he might have seen your heart. He might have known because of COVID you had no availability now, unless I guess you try to cut yourself. In the book, it doesn't say how much you have to or who has to do it. But let's be realistic in today's day and age. He might have known your heart, and the Torah reference also, it not only talks about just the foreskin, which is a symbolism, it also talks about your thoughts, your proclamations and everything, in public, like circumcising all those and disassociating with all your old associations, so he may have knew your heart and your situation, maybe not in the beginning, and I'm obviously giving my opinion here, and he might have seen your heart and knew you would have done it but you could not, and obviously now you've done that, and maybe he protected you long enough to where you could do that.
Well, that's exactly all those thoughts, Mark, went through my head at the time, and I'll be honest, because I had no one to talk to or whatever. And yes, the books were there, and like yourself, I mean, it's so many different books, but that I can't read everything and digest everything. But so therefore, I'm wondering whether my first attempts, although my heart was in it, maybe I was doing it wrong, and certainly because I wasn't circumcised. That's a big thing. But I always remember, there was Yada sort of saying that he was kind of saying, well, there's no reason why a man can't get circumcised these days and do it. And so I just figured, okay, great, that's me sorted. And so yeah, I hope, really, I hope not going to hear anything to the contrary of that. But yeah, I was kind of late to the party on that a little bit. But as I said, it's the timing. It's a little bit hazy now with regards to the year that I sort of really feel that I kind of celebrated Shagmat's before. But yeah, where was I going? So
you were talking about the stuff you were studying, and then Chagma, or then celebrating the Moedim and circumcision.
Yeah. So that and that's when I got into it. But I guess jumping back and forth in my quest to get to that stage, I was looking at all the other stuff, and I've got to be careful how I say these words. But there was a website called Hardcore Christianity, okay, and that was one where it was basically talking about the spiritual world, and this guy would come on and talk about demonic, how there's these different types of demons that make people do certain things or whatever. And and at that time, because I was sort of trying to, I was getting out of that religion. The reason why this was all very sort of poignant to me is that I was then having some issues, particularly with my daughter. She was of an age where she's just become a teenager. She was very, she's lost her mother. She didn't have a mother figure to show her how to do the things that girls need to learn and that kind of stuff. And she was getting into some issues by herself, and she was doing some self-harming, and her when she was born, she had cocaine in her blood vessels, and so she was just didn't start off with the best of ways, and turns out that she then diagnosed with bipolar and other things, of which causes her to make some quite rash decisions and that kind of thing. And I, because I've been into this religious thing, I was kind of wanting to know why do people, what's causing this. And so because my religious mind at that time was taking me down to some sort of spirit or whatever, and not knowing how this all works, that's where that path I went down. So because she was going to the hospital every other day, or getting a call from the school or whatever, because she's a very smart girl and stuff, but she was very sort of quite playing up in class and that sort of thing. And one of the other things that I did to kind of, sort of dedicate my life to understanding what the human psyche, so to speak. As I say, I'm sorry I keep going back and forward, but it was to I actually, because I changed my career. Well, I wasn't working. There was a point where I thought I needed to start working. So I worked as an officer in a young offenders prison. Basically, it's prison for people under a certain age, but they've done just as terrible things as their crimes could be murder, could be things that are like an adult would do. And I guess I thought I could go in there and help. I knew I wasn't going to preach or anything like that. It wasn't my thing. But I just wanted to understand, because I wanted to understand what was going on with my daughter. But the point is, I literally just got through the training, which was very interesting, and then I stayed on my unit for. It was all boys, 8 boys, which is a lot of testosterone, a lot of things going on in there. Do you imagine, these guys are just, and they're all, from gangs, they were gang members, and the days were really horrible because it was kind of making sure that gang members don't, when they're going where it's escorting them to the class, we have to make sure that the other gang's not around. You have to sort of stop people looking through the windows because they're throwing up gang signs and that kind of thing. And I really, really didn't like it. It meant that I couldn't be around for my children, because you feel like you're in prison yourself, because you've got to put in all your you've got to leave your phone in and all your keys and everything, because obviously they can use it as weapons. But I just recall, the reason I mentioned this is because I one day there was I was escorting some guys, and it kicked off. We're going off to the chapel or whatever they call it, the quiet place where these guys were smart. They knew that there was no cameras in this particular part, and it so happens to be two black guys and 5 white guys, and these 5 white guys, they just sort of laid into this guy, and me and my officer companion had to break it up, call the radio, etc., and and that was done. But it turns out you've got to write a report about it. And what disgusted me is that so I wrote my report. I'm on the way home in the car, which is like 30 minutes away or whatever, and then I get a call saying, "Oh, you need to come back. We need you to update this the report." And then they effectively wanted me to make it out to be a racial thing. And I knew damn well that it wasn't racial, because I knew this guy, he's been a bit of a dickhead, and they decided to beat him up, rightly or wrongly. And I just thought, this is how this system works, And I did resign the next day, but I didn't write what they wanted. But the point is that the reason why I went there is that I was actually trying to reach, I wanted to understand their mentality, because I said I had my daughter doing things, and I just thought, whatever. So I left there, but still intrigued by the psychological things, why people do what they do. And now I know about neshama, etc. It kind of makes sense. And but
that's what's crazy too. That's crazy because I never really thought about or paid attention to most of the people on the planet probably do not have a neshama. I never thought about it like that. I just thought we legit had one. Now people might have one and have broke ones, but when they had, now I might have got myself off track. I know, obviously there were people outside of the garden who didn't have a neshama when Adam was there. Then you had Noah when they were there, when they had the flood. It was to wipe out, I believe, neshama man. I don't know that in that area. I don't know that it was to wipe out all the people without a neshama. So, I mean, it's just crazy to think that a lot of people on the planet may not even have a neshama,
I know.
let alone one that they were given, and then just from not listening to it, actually destroyed it and it doesn't work. So yeah, that's kind of crazy just to think about that. You know, you and I are I don't know. All religion takes all the terms blessed, lucky to have a neshama. You know, because I don't think anybody without a neshama would even be able or even consider Yahowah. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Exactly. No, I agree. But yeah, then I started working in a very lowly paid job, but it was quite convenient to where I lived. I just got married, and we moved into a new house. So yeah, I should have said there is a lot more to this, but obviously it's not. I'm not going to go in every detail, but I did remarry, and the reason why, well, my wife who I've met now, she was so when I did meet her when I was walking my dog, happened to be she supported me, my children, especially my daughter, and yeah, it's a lot more complicated than that, but we later became have a romance, and we got married, but we bought a house which we're currently in now, and I decided to work for a care company. It was a charity, and working for people who had schizophrenia and other mental issues, and that was an eye opener for me as well. It didn't turn out to be the way I thought it was going to be. It did. It's kind of just making sure they had their medication and just doing some certain things with them. But I still stayed there for 3 years because it was convenient. I didn't need the money that I did need when I was in IT, and I got on with it. But it was kind of it wasn't the place I needed to be in terms of progress my understanding of why people. As I say, this is almost like there's two things going on. There was a quest to find out where my wife was, and it was also a quest to find out what to do about my daughter, because in my own head, it was demon related and stuff. And I to this day, I'm really so I am ashamed of how things developed after that, because my daughter and my relationship broke down to the point that she wasn't really listening to what I was trying to support her with, and a lot of that could have been because of the religious aspects. In fact, I know it was because I'm sort of there thinking, after reading about or seeing what demonic things can do, and she's in the hospital, she's got her arms cut and stuff like that, and I'm there trying to bloody tell this demon to go away. So you can imagine how that must have felt for her. And she could even be watching right now, and because she does actually know what this website is, and so I do need to apologize, and she knows I apologize for that. But
so are either of your children covenant at all, or religious?
Unfortunately, not. No, none of them. That's the sad thing, that none of them are. They've all got the sort of attributes to understand, none of them are religious or militaristic or politics or anything like that, or conspiracies. If anything, I was the one who told them about some conspiracies years ago, but I did walk away from that some time ago. And yeah, if anything, my daughter is the one person that listens to me. She knows what I'm doing. I try and explain. I'm not trying to force things down, but I'm one of these people, when we start talking, you think it's never going to be a 10-minute chat or something. I'll go off and it always leads back to Yahowah. It always does, because there's nothing more. What we're learning, and how blessed, to use the word as you say.
Sometimes with general conversations, not that I go out anywhere and do anything really, or meet people that often, and sometimes I feel guilty for biting my tongue at work, but I mean, I'm kind of like, okay, well, I still need to pay my bills. If I start going full on about Yahowah to everybody and telling everybody they're wrong, I'm probably not going to have a job, or with my employees, they might hear me say things here and there, but so I feel bad when I don't, but then I'm like, if I do, it could cause all kinds of issues. And it's not that, I hope it's not because I'm being timid. I'm just trying to be smart, because I do have another 10 months to live and need to survive.
Yeah.
But I lost my train of thought where I was going. We were talking about. Oh, I was gonna say, because you were talking about how it all at some point it'll get back to Yahweh. It's funny when you know Yahweh and you're learning these things through the Torah and through Craig's show and all those things, and you have this perspective. It's like everything's relative to Yahweh. It's like on the
Exactly.
news, it's like politics, religion, just these people are
Exactly.
disgusting. It's gross. This cross, this flag. It's just like man is just disgusting. And everything we do is it all comes back. Well, everything in the world is pretty much, it all comes back to its garbage. And the only thing that's not is Torah and Yahweh and the Mikre. And unfortunately,
and it's the only
there's
way
a handful of people on the planet that even have an idea of it.
I know, which is crazy to think of, Mark, isn't it? It's just so mind-blowing to even understand that we're having this conversation. And the thing is, when I have spoken to people before, and the thing is, they kind of say, oh, how do you come? I'm in a cult, I'm in this, and all the, my wife says I'm brainwashed, which doesn't make sense after what I told you before the show. It's just mind-blowing, this. But even down to, you mentioned
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned about the talking to your work colleagues and stuff, and I don't work anymore. I did take voluntary redundancy last year, and it just so happens to coincide with the fact that I'm of an age where I can take out the pension that I've managed to save over the years when I was doing contracting work and all this sort of stuff. So because obviously the Shabbat harvest, I basically sort of told my wife, look, I'm going to just live off what we've got, which kind of, obviously from her point of view, she can't understand that, but I was actually wanting to devote more time for what we're doing now, the kind of thing we're doing now, and But what I was going to say is that I had spoken to work colleagues, my ex manager, who I've worked with for years, who were at the same level before, and I've spoken to him about this. But what really annoyed me, and this is where the AI thing is coming, where I would send him a message or something, and he would literally put it into ChatGPT and not even really bother to think of it, and get whatever ChatGPT decided to regurgitate. And so he would, there'll be things that would be questioning Craig's work and all this kind of stuff, and couldn't be asked basically to even check. I don't know whether you use that phrase at all, but you couldn't even be asked to check the information I was giving him. And even though it was coming from me, and I was putting it into my own words, his ChatGPT decided to disparage the things I said. And so because his ChatGPT decided to do that, he just thought I was talking garbage. And so I just kind of sort of decided to break ties with him, because for someone who I had actually admired as being very smart, etc., I just realized that just some people just don't want to, can't comprehend, what we're trying to say. I use
AI sometimes, and my boss uses it for everything. But yeah, I do agree, and I'm guilty of it sometimes too. But like, if you just Google something or you use AI, yeah, like that's not a dig. But then everybody will take what AI said and say it's good. It's like, no, it's just pulling stuff from offline that you could study yourself, but filtering it through whoever created it, how they lean.
Yeah,
or what's more popular, opposed to, well, popular doesn't mean truth, and like you were talking about a minute ago, what I was going to say is the biggest thing is, to me, is like, realistically, even in Christianity, maybe not so much Judaism, whatever, but there's a lot of people on the planet that won't argue the fact of the Tetragrammaton or whatever. They won't argue the fact that YHWH or Yahowah, that is God's name. Everybody will say you can't say it. It's all consonants, it's all vowels. You shouldn't say it. But no one argues that. So then everybody in Christianity, the fact that it's not in the book, even if you couldn't pronounce it, or the fact that, well, how come we can't pronounce this, but every other letter in every other language and in Hebrew, we can pronounce every other word. So like, I mean, that alone, it's like, you can't no one would, or not no one, but a lot of people, a big chunk of people wouldn't argue the fact that this is the creator's name.
Yeah.
But then why can't we say it? It makes no sense. Or why don't we start there? And why doesn't that open questions? And why don't we look into that? And then once you know his name, then it's like, okay, everything else that we were taught is crap.
Yeah, and I think, and I've always thought this, is that a lot of people are apathetic anyway. They don't really care, and it's not. I was listening to the A to Z show today, and it's so true that all the people tend to with religion, even though they go to church or whatever. When I did go to church, because I did miss out a whole load of stuff there, because I did go to the church after my wife died, and I was even doing the music thing, when you got to put it in sync, and when people are singing from it, I volunteered to do that for a bit. But really, I went to some religious Bible studies or whatever they called it at the time. But I just found everyone, which was fine, everyone was kind of different, but they all seemed a bit so-called holier than thou, to use their words. And I just thought, well, if this is all the people, I thought they were really hypocritical. And I just thought, God, I don't really know if I want to be, even if, to go to heaven, because I went through baptism and all that sort of stuff as well. And I thought, why would I want to be around these people anyway? Because I don't really like big crowds, and I'm in a church. So I was really out of my comfort zone in the first place. I had to push myself to even go there. Being, as I said, not having many friends around here. My best friends are all not around. So I just did not have anyone to communicate with except my children. And so that's why I think I was able to focus so much. And I was a bit of a recluse in reading and listening, especially listening.
Two questions. First one's just a question. Second one's we'll get you back on track from me distracting you. First one is, how's your daughter? I know you at one point the struggle she was going through. How's your daughter now? Is she doing well? Has she been able to over time grow out all those things?
She's fine. And she's married now. She got married early in the year. She's got 2 children. So she's got a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, nearly 8. Unfortunately, her daughter has got some learning difficulties, which we think is autistically related, but she hasn't had that sort of diagnosed yet. And she has a supportive husband, one that doesn't want to know particularly about. He's from a different. He's from Albania, Italian Albanian, and that culturally we don't really have much in common, even in his family, because it's a hard language barrier and stuff. But no, he's good, and she's good together. So she's definitely, unfortunately, she still has her scars, but I don't know whether that's it's something you can't cover up. Particularly,
and then the second thing was just to get us back on track. You were talking about then obviously, I think we didn't get to the point. I think we did, and then we jumped off, and then we went back where you had actually started looking into or come to know Yahowah's name. But I know where you left off last was when you had met your now wife. You guys, had gotten married and stuff, and then I think that's kind of where you left off, and we're going.
Okay. Well, yeah. So we got married, and we've been together for the last 8 years. I did explain that there's been some really rough rides going on right now, and because of the Shabu harvest, and because she basically she has autism and ADHD, and she believes that I'm going to go. She's in fact adamant, even though her family don't. She had to have she sort of had an intervention for me. We had a session where she was staying with her sister, who happens to live in Dubai, and they called me up with her brother, who's in England, and someone else, and they basically had a video call, and they sort of said, "Look, what you're doing, what's going on?" I'd actually showed them one of the Yada talking about what the Shabu harvest was. I sent that to them. So I'm facing, 7, 8 people on this call, which is not something that there's no fun at all, because for me, I need to talk to 1 or 2 people at any one time, because I don't know what I want to have a proper conversation. If you're going to ask me about this and you really want to hear what I'm saying, then let me just talk to one person. And I effectively realized that they think I'm a nutcase or whatever. I was very articulate and explained what was going on, and of course, so Yada is. I mean, it was coming from the horse's mouth. But with regards to them, what they think, I'm pretty sure her and her friends as well probably think that what you're doing with him, sort of thing, and that's just caused so much stress. And I really, to the point where she sort of thinks, she sort of said, I wish you hadn't told me, and that literally that I'm just bam gone. But the fact is, I've literally given up every possession that I have. I've put into her name. So this house is now, the deeds are in her name, the car's in her name, and we've transitioned. We've been doing that. We've for the last year, from the May 22nd, we were preparing more. Before that, we were sort of once I knew, I felt that was the moral thing to do, was to explain to her what was going on in my life. But unfortunately, it turned out to be about me. It was more like that I'm she didn't sign up for this, and etc. But I'm trying to explain, there's a reason why this is going to happen, and I really love you guys, and I would want you to be be on the ark, be on the ark, I should say, as well. In other words, I would like, but none of them ever came back from that. Someone would say, that sounds quite interesting. And I used to say to my wife, yeah, okay, let's see if anybody calls me and says, Mark, can we go into, can you explain a little bit more? And none of them did. And so I was vindicated about that. And it's not because I want that to be, but you just kind of know. I think have to, that person who, it's got to be kind of like, I suppose you're gripped once because for me, this was such a revelation. I hate using the word, but because of the Bible sort of connection, but it's a revelation to understand that what have been taught and learned all these years, and what dictates the vast majority of people's lives, which is religion, and it is not true. And it made sense, because I just couldn't believe some of the stories when I was a kid, but or even after that, and yet you feel compelled to have to just go along with the everybody else. So yeah.
So obviously your wife passed, you started digging, searching a lot of things, you're going through a lot of stuff,
right,
and then you ran into some of Craig's stuff. But how long would you when was your first introduction, just a generalization of years, I guess, to Craig's work, or the name Yahowah, or I don't know why I said that, apologies, Yahowah? And then when do you think you were covenant, and how long has that been?
I think we're in the region of about 8 years that I was aware of his work and reading it. And I think I think it was, so I read, well, honestly, Craig is so right. I read Questioning Paul, which was the first the one that's about the Christianity thing, series, or to renounce that. And it doesn't take long before it's like, wow, yep, I get that tick. And I'm very much like that. I sort of read that. That's about 8 years. So that's about 8 years. So I'm going to go off track if I don't keep on. And then after that, probably a couple of years just digesting a lot of stuff. So because of I was downloading everything from James's site and that kind of thing. This is why it's a little bit messed up for me to kind of picture the timeline. But it's probably been about 5 years, I reckon, that I started observing the piece, the Mikre, as it should be, about 5 years, I think.
And then how long, because of COVID and all that, have you been the circumcision, to where you knew more of what you were doing and you were meeting Yahowah's requirements?
Well, all that time I'd been reading and listening and stuff, but I actually tried to look up the date that I got circumcised, to be honest, and I couldn't find it. It would have been as soon as, because I'd booked it just as soon as I knew lockdown had come available.
Okay.
That lockdown was off. And
I was just trying to kind of give everybody a little, like a timeline generalization. It's like the stuff happened. So it was about 8 years. That's when you kind of introduced to Craig and different things, start reading, studying. And then by the 5-6 year mark out, you started celebrating the Mikre. And then, several years after that, a year or so after that, you probably got circumcised because then COVID was starting to open up and everything. So just kind of a little synopsis of the timeline.
Yeah, I guess that's a kind of a rough and fair way to say it, because, as I said, if I knew the dates, but it becomes, as I say, such a blur because of the amount of information I was digesting. Because I had all the time in the world, and as I said, I kind of, that's my nature, is to, when when I'm into something, I kind of really get into it. And there's nothing more than this. There's just nothing more than I could want to know more. It is quite a thing that once you can't get enough of, and because of Craig's manner, I love watching Craig or Yada. It's and I love it. He can go. He's funny, but he's also, my gosh, you do not want to be on the other side of when he's on an angry mood, and. He broke out with some C words last week. I nearly blushed.
On the blog. I heard it happened 2 days in a row. I saw the first one.
Yeah, it was.
He was telling, shut that.
That's right. And that I think
she was disgusting. She was
yeah.
disgusting to listen to. It made my blood boil. It made me sick, but
everything that oh my gosh, it is, and that's the problem. It magnifies so much when you start to hear this. When you hear people talking, spouting nonsense, and as for why I don't vomit every time Trump comes on the screen and says anything, I do not know.
And that same day in the vlog on the blog, they had done, I think, Scott a post previous to that. It was Scott Ryder or something like that. I can't remember all the names.
Oh, Ritter, yeah, Scott Ritter.
Listen to, and he was saying that Israel should be wiped off the face of the planet.
Oh, no.
And the problem is when you have people that, and I'm sure there's got to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that would agree with him. When you are in a position where you think people should be wiped off the planet, and that many people, and it's mainstream, and that many people believe it, you have some really sick people in society. Now, I do agree. Islam, that should be wiped off the face of the planet, but that's not a people, that's a religion. There's a whole entire difference between people and a religion. So, that's crazy.
Now that you mention Islam as well, the other thing that's kind of affected it doesn't affect my life personally, but what I didn't mention before is with my sort of fracture with my daughter, she basically went into a care. She was about 18. She was a little bit younger than that. And she found herself in a home, which I didn't expect it to turn out the way it was. But there were other because they sold me a lie. These sort of so-called care agencies who were trying to support me, because I was at my wit's end. The end of my tether as to what to do, and I gave her I gave her an ultimatum as to what she wanted to do: stay at home and sort of buckle down and change, and not do the silly thing she did, or be going somewhere else where she can be looked over. But turns out that this is when they had people from different places come in. So long and short of it is that one of the illegal immigrants, the father of her child, the first one, is from an illegal immigrant who happens to be still, he's still part on the scene. So he's not as bad as some of them. He's a Kurd, but he didn't. He's Islamic, and he where was I going with this? But yeah, so that was my sort of first thing that affected me. Now in the UK, this is so rife now with regards to the boats that have been illegal boats coming in from France, and it's such a big, heavy topic over here. it's quite frightening to see, literally it'll be 1,000 people or whatever. That's what they said the other day. I could have thought, well, no, that can't be possible. But they come in, and that's on a day, of Islamic places of which they've got no idea where they're from. And did you see the other day in Morocco, from Morocco to Spain? I mean, they literally had thousands of people came over from Morocco. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
Of this, so yeah. So in Islam, I had no time for whatsoever. It's not something that I just always despised what it represented, possibly because of all the information that Craig or Yahowah has told us. But it just reinforced what I thought I knew anyway.
Well, you got anything else you want to add to your story? Anything you can think of that maybe you're leaving out? Or it sounds like you got pretty current with your,
Yeah, I've gone back and forth. There were some other things that were going on. And I'll actually tell you something that, a few years ago, and this is something that I was always a bit afraid to sort of talk about. I have spoken to people who are not in the covenant, because you're the first I'm talking about this. But so after I'd got my dog, after my wife had passed, a year had gone past, and I decided I needed companionship, and I got a dog. And our dog, when I'm on my Facebook, you can see a picture of her. She's passed away now for the last 2 years. I miss her so much. But we used to obviously take walks. I remember one night, pitch black, we were walking across our the moors close to home. And to this day, I have no other way of explaining this, but I literally heard a voice as clear as day that said, "Are you looking for me?" All right, and that's kind of sort of freaked me out, and I'm not sure if my dog heard at the time, but there was just absolutely no one that could have been about. I wasn't drinking, or I wasn't smoking weed or anything like that. I was clear as as I'm sitting here now, and there was sort of a wind came up at the same time, and it was kind of like so from that, and I remember soon afterwards, when I was listening to one of the shows, and Craig was talking about the Ruach Kadesh and how it was feminine and stuff like that, and all sorts of things was going through my head. But I know that couldn't have been, because that wouldn't have been Yahowah style, And so that was prior to me really finding Yahowah. But I don't know if anyone could explain that to me. And because I was looking, I told you before about the hardcore Christianity thing, where it's talked about all this sort of stuff. Obviously, that kind of entered my head. It's like, wow, what have I just experienced there? Have you ever come across anything like that? Anything that you vaguely similar?
So to you, it was audible. It wasn't a voice in your head.
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, and because there was like a wind, it was almost like it was just a sudden kind of like a wisp of wind and a very feminine, soft voice. And that freaked me because
I'm not well versed enough or old enough.
No, I know. And as I said,
I mean, I know that God works. Yahowah works through people. I don't know. Is that to say he never would do something like that, or have his spirit or malak or something? I just don't know. I don't know enough. I would think though too that there could also be the opposite, like when you were looking into the different, demonic things and stuff back when the Christian stuff. So, so I don't know, but
no,
it's something to chew on, and maybe you'll have the answer when you're in Shamayim. But
that's
ultimately, it's not taking you to the covenant or keeping you from it. So. But yeah, no, that is interesting. That's definitely, if somebody goes through an experience like that, you're not, you know what I mean? You're not going to forget it. So, who knows?
Exactly.
You may learn in a year on Shabuah, or less than a year. You might have answers to it, and I might be like, hey, this was me just kind of throwing you a little something, or
giving you a nudge.
Yeah.
Well, if it was, then I'm here now, as you say, and I'm so grateful for everything. So Just a little sad, obviously, for my family and etc. Like anybody else. But yeah,
Yeah.
I know that what I know is true. It's so resonates with me and makes so much sense. And the stories of Boaz and Ruth and stuff have just kind of completely topped it off. It's just, and this is a sad thing with my wife because she's very quite a romantic. She's a romantic, and I could always visualized her sort of being with me, and when a few years ago before the Shavua, and yeah, that's not to be, but yeah, it's a fantastic story that it keeps on giving and will be more and more that for us to understand.
Yeah. Hopefully she makes Teruah.
Yeah,
You know.
that's what I hope so.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on today,
Oh,
sharing your
thanks.
story. I mean, this is awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed meeting you prior to the show, and we got to talk face to face and talking now. So look forward to watching, your book club, and obviously staying in touch through the site like we do. And maybe every once in a while we can jump
Yeah,
on something like this and just talk and chat and
yeah, I'd
catch
love
up.
that, Mark. I really would, and I really appreciate you asking me. And just on that book club, we've actually got we're having to change. We're going to change our name. Not that it really makes any difference, but it's going to be called Words to Consider. That's right. This is what the family have kind of come up with, and it is kind of words to consider as we read through. And as just before the show, I was just trying to do some get the sort of work, the artwork or whatever you call it, the graphics sort of sorted out, and then I have to then go via the guys and see if they approve or not. But it's really fun. It's been.
I don't currently have. I like that. The name of the show. I don't currently have the graphic design or all that. I have none of that skill currently, nor the time to really learn it.
Yes, you do.
So
yes, you do. All you have to use is I use ChatGPT to basically tell it what you want. It draws me an image, and then I use what's it called? Comfy to kind of do the rest. And it really is.
Well, I'm not saying I can't do it. I don't think I'm incapable. I think I could learn it. I just don't currently have that knowledge, and I don't really have a lot of the time. There's not a lot of extra time between everything. So as of now, my shows stay with the art they got. Shout out to Mariah for the intro that I do have here, because she basically did all of it with a little bit of feedback from me. So I'm relying on my other family members that already have the acquired skills for some of the aspects of the shows.
Well, that's how it works. It's a teamwork, isn't it? And we all pull together, and
what we're going to be doing. What we're going to be doing in Sukkah, and what we're going to be doing, with the remnant. So maybe for eternity, helping each other and working together. So.
Yeah.
All right, Mark. Well, you take care. It was great to, like I said, great to talk to you, and everybody who watches, appreciate it. Thank you. I guess. Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.